Baby dragons feared all, human baby one. Part 1. The Hatchlings' Fear. The Draconari had not left their home system in 40 years. Every attempt at diplomacy ended the same way. Their children panicked, burned something, and the hosts asked them to leave. It was not rudeness. It was biology. Draconari hatchlings were born with fear written into their bones. Yanara stood at the airlock of Harmony Station, her silver scales tight against her body. Behind her, clutched in her tail, was Sarath. Her son was 6 months old in dragon years, which meant he was old enough to walk but young enough to fear everything that moved. The airlock opened. A Velnorian trade delegate stood waiting. He was tall, blue-skinned, and smiling. Sarath screamed. The scream came with fire. Not much fire, just a small burst of orange flame that shot from the hatchling's mouth and hit the Velnorian's chest. The delegate stumbled backward, patting at his singed robes, his smile gone. "I am sorry," Yanara said quickly. "He cannot control it, he is young." The Velnorian nodded slowly, but his eyes were hard. "Perhaps the child should remain on your ship." "He cannot. Draconari hatchlings die if separated from their mothers for more than a few hours. It is our biology." This was the problem. This had always been the problem. Draconari mothers could not leave their young behind, and Draconari young could not stop being afraid. Yanara walked into the station with Sarath pressed against her leg. The hatchling's scales had turned deep red, the color of terror. His small wings trembled. His eyes darted in every direction, searching for threats that existed only in his ancient instincts. They passed a group of Menari traders. Sarath hissed and released another burst of flame. The traders scattered. They walked by a cleaning robot. Sarath tried to bite it. They entered the main hall where the diplomatic council waited, and Sarath saw the crowd of alien faces and simply froze. His whole body went stiff. Smoke poured from his nostrils. Yanara could feel him shaking. "Control your offspring," said Counselor Mordeth. He was an elder Draconari, his scales dark with age. He had come to observe the talks, though Yanara suspected he had really come to watch them fail. Mordeth believed that Draconari should remain isolated. He believed contact with other species was a mistake. "He is trying," Yanara said. "He is only a hatchling." "Then he should not be here." "Then I should not be here. And if I am not here, who speaks for our people?" Mordeth had no answer to that. Yanara was the only Draconari ambassador willing to make the journey. The others had given up years ago. The council session began badly and got worse. Sarath cried through the opening statements. He set fire to a curtain during the trade discussions. He bit the leg of a chair and refused to let go for 20 minutes. By the time the session ended, half the delegates had requested that the Draconari be removed from the station. Yanara carried Sarath to their assigned quarters. The hatchling was exhausted, his scales faded to a dull gray. He had spent the entire day being terrified, and terror was tiring. "Why," Yanara whispered to him, "why must you fear everything?" Sarath did not answer. He did not understand the question. He only knew that the universe was large and full of strange things, and strange things could hurt him. This knowledge was older than language. It lived in his blood. Yanara set him down on a soft mat and stood by the window. The station's observation deck was visible from here, and she could see other species walking, talking, existing without fear. A human man stood near the glass, holding something small in his arms. Yanara looked closer. The human was holding an infant, a tiny human with soft skin and no scales and no claws and no fire, the most defenseless creature Yanara had ever seen. The human baby looked toward the window. Somehow, impossibly, the baby seemed to be looking directly at their quarters, at Sarath. Sarath lifted his head. The baby waved. It was a clumsy wave, the kind that bobbies make when they are still learning how their hands work, just a small motion of fingers. Yanara waited for Sarath to scream. She waited for the fire, the hissing, the panic. Nothing happened. Sareth stared at the human baby. His scales did not turn red. His wings did not tremble. He simply watched, and for the first time since leaving their homeworld, he was still. "Sareth," Yanara said softly. The hatchling chirped. It was a quiet sound, curious and calm. Yanara had never heard him make that sound before. She had never heard any hatchling make that sound toward a stranger. The human father turned and walked away, carrying his baby with him. Sareth watched until they disappeared around a corner. Then he looked up at his mother with eyes that held something other than fear. Yanara did not know what it meant. She did not understand what had just happened. But she knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that something important had changed. Tomorrow she would find that human. Tomorrow she would learn why his infant did not make her son afraid. Tomorrow might be different. Sareth curled into a ball and closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he fell asleep without crying. His scales slowly shifted from gray to a soft, peaceful blue. Yanara stood guard over him and wondered if hope was something she was allowed to feel. Baby dragons feared all, human baby one. Part 2, an impossible reaction. Counselor Mordeth called it meaningless, a trick of light, a moment of exhaustion. Hatchlings sometimes grew too tired to panic, he said. It meant nothing. Yanara disagreed. She had raised 3 children before Sareth. She knew what exhaustion looked like, and she knew what calm looked like. What she had seen last night was calm. She found the human in the station's botanical garden the next morning. He was kneeling beside a row of flowering plants, his baby daughter sitting in a carrier next to him. The baby was chewing on a soft toy and watching a butterfly with serious concentration. "Excuse me," Yanara said. The human looked up. He did not flinch at the sight of her, which was unusual. Most species took a moment to adjust to Draconari appearance. They were large, scaled, and had teeth designed for tearing meat. Humans, Yanara had read, were descended from prey animals. They should have been afraid. This human simply smiled. "Hello, you must be Ambassador Yanara. I'm Daniel Brennan, Chief Botanist." "You have an offspring," Yanara said. She was not skilled at small talk. "I do, this is Lily. She's 14 months old." Yanara looked at Lily. The baby looked back at her with wide brown eyes. There was no fear in those eyes, only curiosity. "Yesterday," Yanara said slowly, "your offspring saw my son through the window. My son did not react with fear." Daniel's eyebrows rose. "I heard Draconari hatchlings are afraid of everything." "They are, it is in their nature. They are born with memories of ancient predators, threats that no longer exist. Until they mature, they cannot separate real danger from imagined danger. Everything is a threat to them." "That sounds exhausting." "It is for them and for us." Yanara hesitated. "But last night when your daughter waved at him, Sareth was not afraid. I do not understand why." Daniel looked at Lily, then back at Yanara. "Would you like to try again, a controlled test?" Yanara's heart beat faster. "Yes, I would." They arranged to meet in a private observation room, away from crowds and noise. Yanara brought Sareth, who clung to her leg with his small claws. Daniel brought Lily, who seemed delighted by everything she saw. Dr. Amara Okonkwo joined them. She was the station's physician and xenobiologist, a tall woman with kind eyes and quick hands. She set up recording equipment in the corners of the room. "This is purely observational," Dr. Okonkwo said. "We won't force anything. If either child shows distress, we stop immediately." Yanara nodded. She understood the caution. She also understood that this might be the most important experiment in Draconari history. Daniel sat down on the floor with Lily in his lap. The baby immediately started playing with his fingers, unaware that she was part of anything significant. Sareth pressed against Yanara's leg. His scales were shifting through shades of orange and red, the colors of anxiety. He could smell the humans. He could see them. His instincts were telling him to run, to fight, to burn. But then Lily looked at him. The baby made a sound. It was not a word, just a babble, the meaningless noise that human infants make when they are exploring their voices. She reached out one hand toward Sareth, fingers spread wide. Sareth's scales flickered, orange to yellow, yellow to green. Yanara held her breath. The hatchling took one step forward, then another. His wings were still trembling, but his eyes were fixed on Lily. He was not looking at her like she was a threat. He was looking at her like she was a puzzle. Lily babbled again and clapped her hands. Sareth chirped, the same soft sound he had made last night, curious, interested, unafraid. "Remarkable," Dr. Okonkwo whispered. Daniel stayed perfectly still, letting his daughter control the interaction. Lily seemed to understand that the small dragon was nervous. She stopped clapping and simply held out her hand, waiting. Sareth crept closer. His nose twitched. He sniffed the air around the baby, taking in her scent. Then very slowly he touched his snout to her palm. Lily giggled. Sareth's scales turned blue, not the gray blue of exhaustion but the bright blue of calm, of safety. "She does not fear him," Yanara said, her voice thick with emotion. "And because she does not fear him, he does not fear her." Dr. Okonkwo was recording everything, her eyes wide. "I think it's more than that. Look at them. They recognize something in each other." Yanara watched her son sit down beside the human baby. Lily patted his head with clumsy gentleness. Sareth made a rumbling sound deep in his throat, almost like purring. "What do they recognize?" Yanara asked. Daniel spoke quietly. "They're both small. They're both helpless. They both depend completely on their parents to survive. Maybe that's a language all its own." Yanara thought about this. In all her years of diplomatic training, she had learned dozens of alien languages, hundreds of customs, thousands of protocols. But she had never considered that helplessness itself could be a form of communication. Sareth curled his tail around Lily's ankle. The baby did not pull away. She simply continued patting his head, content. "Counselor Mordeth will say this proves nothing," Yanara said. "Do you believe that?" Daniel asked. Yanara looked at her son. He was calm, he was peaceful, he was not afraid. "No," she said, "I believe this changes everything." Baby dragons feared all, human baby one. Part 3. The Language of the Small. Dr. Okonkwo stood before the diplomatic council with her research displayed on the wall behind her. She had spent 3 weeks studying Sareth and Lily. She had gathered data, recorded observations, and consulted with experts across 12 systems. Now she had an answer. "Most species in the galaxy," she began, "are born capable. Velnorians can walk within hours of birth. Menari hatchlings can hunt within days. Keseth larvae are fully independent from the moment they emerge. This is normal. This is how evolution usually works." She changed the display. 2 images appeared side by side. One showed a Draconari hatchling, the other showed a human infant. "These 2 species are different. Draconari hatchlings are born completely helpless. They cannot feed themselves. They cannot defend themselves. They cannot regulate their own body temperature. For the first 2 years of life, they depend entirely on their parents." Counselor Mordeth shifted in his seat. "We know our own biology, Doctor." "Yes, but do you know that humans are the same?" The council went quiet. Dr. Okonkwo pointed at the image of Lily. "Human infants are among the most helpless newborns in the known galaxy. They cannot walk for nearly a year. They cannot speak for longer. They require constant care, constant attention, constant protection. A human infant left alone would die within days." "This is weakness," Mordeth said. "This is connection," Dr. Okonkwo replied. "Both Draconari and humans evolved extended childhoods because their young need to learn. They need time to develop complex brains, complex social structures, complex emotions. They pay for this with years of vulnerability. She brought up footage of Soreth and Lily together. In the recording, the two infants were sitting side by side. Lily was stacking blocks. Soreth was watching her, his head tilted with interest. When Lily knocked over her tower, she laughed. Soreth made his chirping sound in response. They recognize each other, Dr. Okonkwo said. Not as threats, not as prey, not as predators. They recognize each other as fellow small ones, as fellow vulnerable beings in a large and frightening universe. Yanara spoke from her seat. Soreth has never felt safe outside our homeworld. Our hatchlings carry ancient fears in their blood. They see danger everywhere because for millions of years, danger was everywhere. But when he looks at Lily, he sees someone who understands what it means to be small and afraid. And Lily, someone asked. Daniel answered. Lily has never been afraid of Soreth because she doesn't know she should be. Human bobbies trust completely. They have to. Their survival depends on trusting that the adults around them will protect them. When she sees Soreth, she sees another baby, another small creature who needs care. Dr. Okonkwo nodded. This is the key. Draconari hatchlings fear everything because their instincts tell them the universe is dangerous. But human infants trust everything because their instincts tell them the universe will provide. When these two perspectives meet, something remarkable happens. She showed more footage. Soreth and Lily playing together. Soreth bringing Lily a soft blanket when she cried. Lily petting Soreth's wings when he seemed nervous. Two infants from different worlds, speaking a language that had no words. We brought 3 more Draconari hatchlings to the station last week, Yanara said. All of them showed reduced fear responses around human children, not just Lily, any human child. The council murmured, this was significant. Are you suggesting, the Velnorian delegate asked slowly, that human children can somehow cure Draconari fear? Not cure, Dr. Okonkwo said. Soothe. Human infants project such complete trust, such total lack of fear, that Draconari hatchlings respond to it. They pick up on the emotional cues. If the small human is not afraid, perhaps there is nothing to fear. This is absurd, Mordeth said. We are Draconari. We are the apex predators of the galaxy. We do not need humans to teach us how to feel safe. A loud alarm suddenly filled the room. Red lights flashed along the walls. An automated voice announced a pressure warning in the outer hull. Soreth, who had been sleeping quietly beside Yanara, woke with a scream. His scales turned crimson. Fire burst from his mouth in panicked jets. Lily, still in Daniel's arms, began to cry. Soreth heard her crying. He stopped screaming. He looked at her with wide eyes, his own fear momentarily forgotten. Then he did something no one expected. He moved toward her. He pressed his small body against her side. He wrapped his tail around her gently and made a soft cooing sound, trying to comfort her. Lily's crying slowed. She reached out and grabbed one of Soreth's wings, holding it like a security blanket. Within moments, both infants were calm again. The alarm stopped. The pressure warning had been a false alert, but no one in the council was paying attention to that. They were all watching the two infants holding onto each other. Yanara felt tears sliding down her scales. Dragons did not cry often. It was reserved for moments of profound emotion. Her child had just comforted another. Her child, who feared everything, had found something he feared losing more than he feared the universe. He had found a friend. Do you still think this proves nothing? Daniel asked Mordeth quietly. The old counselor did not answer. For the first time in a very long time, he had nothing to say. Baby dragons feared all, human baby one. Part 4, the bond deepens. 2 months had passed since the council meeting. The diplomatic talks were progressing better than anyone had hoped. Trade agreements were being signed. Cultural exchanges were being planned. For the first time in Draconari history, real peace with other species seemed possible. But the true miracle happened every afternoon, in a small playroom on the station's third level. Lily sat on a soft mat, surrounded by toys. Soreth lay beside her, his scales a constant peaceful blue. The hatchling had nearly doubled in size over the past weeks, but he still moved with careful gentleness around his human friend. Lily picked up a stuffed animal and offered it to Soreth. The dragon took it delicately in his mouth, carried it across the room, and brought it back to her. Lily clapped her hands with delight. "Fetch," Daniel said, shaking his head with wonder. "My daughter taught a dragon to play fetch." Yanara watched from the doorway. "He has never played before. On our homeworld, hatchlings are too afraid to play. They spend their early years hiding, flinching, burning things by accident. Soreth has done none of that in weeks." "He follows her lead," Dr. Okonkwo observed. "She was always nearby during these sessions, recording everything. When she laughs, he relaxes. When she cries, he tries to help. He's learning emotional regulation from a human baby." This was the part that fascinated the scientific community. Draconari hatchlings had always been considered untrainable. Their fear responses were too strong, too deeply rooted in their biology. But Lily, without training or intention, had done what generations of Draconari parents had failed to do. She had shown Soreth that the universe could be safe. The door opened behind them. Counselor Mordeth entered, followed by a Draconari that Yanara did not recognize. "Ambassador," Mordeth said stiffly, "this is Vareth. He represents the Isolation faction." Yanara's scales tightened. She had heard of the Isolation faction. They believed that Draconari should have no contact with other species. They believed that interaction with aliens weakened their people. Vareth was tall and dark-scaled, with eyes that held no warmth. He looked at Soreth and Lily playing together, and his lip curled with disgust. "This is what our diplomacy has created," Vareth said. "A Draconari hatchling acting like a pet." "He is not a pet," Yanara said sharply. "He is a child forming a friendship." "Friendship?" Vareth spoke the word like it tasted bad. "Draconari do not need friends. We need strength. We need independence. We do not need to be soothed by soft little humans." Daniel stepped forward, his jaw tight. "That soft little human has done more for Draconari relations than 50 years of failed diplomacy." "Because she has made your hatchling weak," Vareth said to Yanara. "Look at him. He does not even flinch when strangers enter the room. His fear responses are gone. What will happen when he faces real danger? Will he wait for a human to tell him whether to be afraid?" Yanara had no answer. It was a question she had asked herself in dark moments. "The Isolation faction demands a test," Vareth continued. "We will expose your hatchling to a standard fear stimulus without the human present. We will prove that this bond has damaged him." "No," Yanara said immediately. "It is not your choice. The council has approved it, Mordeth." The old counselor looked uncomfortable, but he nodded. "The faction has raised legitimate concerns. A controlled test will settle the matter." "What kind of test?" Daniel asked. "Tomorrow, an asteroid will pass near the station," Vareth said. "It is a scheduled event, completely safe. But asteroids trigger deep fear memories in Draconari. Our ancestors were nearly destroyed by asteroid impacts millions of years ago. Every hatchling carries the terror in their blood." He looked at Soreth, who was now gently grooming Lily's hair with his tongue. The baby giggled at the sensation. "We will bring your hatchling to the observation deck to watch the asteroid pass," Vareth said. "Without the human, if his fear responses are intact, he will react normally. If they are gone, we will know that human influence has corrupted him." "And if his fear responses are gone," Yanara asked quietly, "what then?" Vareth smiled coldly. "Then the Isolation faction will have the evidence we need to end this experiment permanently. We will take your son home, away from human corruption, and ensure that no other hatchling is exposed to their influence." Yanara felt her heart's pounding. She looked at Soreth, happily playing with his friend, unaware of the threat hanging over him. "The test will occur at midday tomorrow," Vareth said. "Prepare your son, and prepare yourself, Ambassador. The age of human influence over Drakenari is about to end." He turned and left. Mordeth followed, not meeting Yanara's eyes. Daniel moved to stand beside her. "We won't let them take him." "You may not have a choice," Yanara said. "Drakenari law is clear. If the faction proves that Soreth has been harmed by human contact, they have the right to intervene." They both looked at the two infants on the mat. Lily had fallen asleep against Soreth's warm side. The dragon hatchling had curled around her protectively, his eyes half closed in contentment. Tomorrow that peace would be tested. Yanara did not know if it would survive. Baby dragons feared all, human baby one. Part 5: Fear Returns. Soreth knew something was wrong the moment they separated him from Lily. The hatchling made distressed sounds as Vareth's guards led him away from the playroom. He twisted his head, trying to see his friend, but Lily was already out of sight. His scales flickered from blue to nervous green. Yanara walked beside him, her heart breaking. She had tried to stop this. She had argued with the council, pleaded with Mordeth, even threatened to abandon the diplomatic mission entirely. Nothing had worked. The test would proceed. "It will be quick," she told Soreth, though she knew he could not understand her words. "Just a few minutes, then you can see Lily again." Soreth whimpered. The observation deck was a large circular room with transparent walls that offered a view of space in all directions. It was beautiful on normal days. Today it felt like a trap. Vareth stood in the center of the room, his arms crossed. Several members of the isolation faction stood with him, their expressions satisfied. They had wanted this moment for a long time. "Place the hatchling near the window," Vareth ordered. The guards released Soreth. The young dragon immediately tried to run back toward the door, toward the corridor that led to Lily. One of the guards blocked his path. Soreth's scales shifted to orange, anxiety, fear beginning to build. "The asteroid will be visible in 3 minutes," Vareth said. "We will observe the hatchling's natural responses without human interference." Yanara stood frozen, unable to help, unable to look away. She could see her son's small body trembling. He was searching the room for something familiar, something safe. He found nothing. 2 minutes passed. Soreth began to pace in tight circles, his breathing growing rapid. Smoke leaked from his nostrils. 1 minute. "There," Vareth said, pointing at the window. A shape appeared against the stars. It was distant at first, just a dark spot moving across the void. But it grew larger quickly, tumbling end over end as it passed near the station. "The asteroid." Soreth saw it and froze. For a moment nothing happened. The hatchling simply stared at the massive rock hurtling through space, his eyes wide and unblinking. Then the ancient memories awakened. Soreth screamed. It was not the small cry of a startled child. It was the primal shriek of a species that had watched their world burn, that had hidden in caves while mountains fell from the sky, that carried extinction in their collective memory. Fire erupted from his mouth. Not controlled bursts but wild jets of flame that shot in every direction. The observation deck's fire suppression systems activated immediately, spraying foam across the floor, but Soreth could not stop. His scales had turned crimson. His wings beat frantically against his sides. He spun and thrashed, unable to see anything except the nightmare in the window and the flames that his own terror created. "Fear response confirmed," Vareth said calmly. "The hatchling is normal. The human influence was temporary." Yanara tried to reach her son, but the flames were too intense. The heat pushed her back. She could only watch as Soreth spiraled deeper into panic. Then she heard it. A baby crying. The sound came from the corridor outside. Lily's cry, the familiar wail of a human infant in distress. Soreth heard it too, His head snapped toward the door, flames still pouring from his mouth. The door burst open. Daniel Brennan stood in the entrance, his daughter in his arms. Behind him, 2 security guards were shouting at him to stop, but he pushed past them into the burning room. "Daniel, no!" Yanara screamed. But Daniel did not stop. He walked through the smoke and the foam and the heat, holding Lily close to his chest, and he kept his eyes fixed on Sareth. "It's okay," he said. His voice was calm, steady, the voice of a father soothing a frightened child. "It's okay, little one, we're here." Sareth's flames flickered. His crimson scales began to shift at the edges, hints of other colors breaking through. Lily was still crying, but her cries were changing. She had seen Sareth. She reached out toward him, straining against her father's grip. "Friend," Daniel said softly, "your friend needs you, Lily." He knelt down, bringing Lily closer to Sareth's level. The hatchling's flames died, just like that. One moment fire, the next moment nothing but smoke rising from his exhausted body. Sareth looked at Lily, Lily looked at Sareth. The baby stopped crying. She reached out with both hands, grabbing at the air, making the urgent sounds that infants make when they want something desperately. Sareth took one shaky step forward, then another. "Stop this," Vareth demanded. "Guards, remove the human." No one moved. Every person in the room was watching the 2 infants. Sareth reached Lily. He pressed his snout against her small palm. His scales shifted from crimson to orange to yellow to green and finally, slowly, to blue. Lily grabbed his face with both hands and made a happy sound. Sareth made his chirping noise in response, the sound of calm, the sound of safety, the sound of a small creature who had found his way home. Daniel looked up at Vareth, his eyes hard. "You wanted to prove that fear was stronger," he said. "You were wrong." Vareth had no response. He stared at the 2 infants, his expression unreadable. Yanara moved forward and wrapped herself around her son and the human child who had saved him. Tears fell from her eyes onto their small bodies. In the window behind them, the asteroid continued its journey through space, harmless and forgotten. Fear had returned, but love had won. Baby dragons feared all, human baby won. Part 6. What the Small Ones Teach. The council chamber fell silent when Counselor Mordeth rose to speak. 3 days had passed since the observation deck incident. The station's engineers had repaired the fire damage. The diplomatic talks had resumed, but everyone knew that something fundamental had changed. "I have served the Draconari people for 200 years, Mordeth said. His voice was different now, softer than before. "I have watched us fail at diplomacy again and again. I have watched our hatchlings suffer through their fears alone. I believed this was our fate. I believed we were meant to be isolated." He paused, looking across the room at Yanara and Daniel, who sat together with their children. Sareth was curled around Lily, his tail wrapped gently around her ankle. The human baby had her head resting against his side, fast asleep. Neither of them cared about councils or politics or the fate of civilizations. They only cared about each other. "I was wrong," Mordeth said. A murmur went through the assembly. Draconari elders did not admit mistakes easily. "What I witnessed on the observation deck was impossible. A hatchling in full terror spiral, surrounded by fire and ancient nightmares, brought back to peace by the presence of a human infant." Mordeth shook his head slowly. "I have studied our biology for a century. I know what fear does to our young. I know that nothing should have been able to reach Sareth in that moment. Nothing except the bond he has formed with that small human." Vareth stood abruptly. "This proves nothing. The hatchling is compromised. His fear responses have been damaged by human influence. He is no longer truly Draconari." "No longer truly Draconari," Mordeth turned to face him. "He protected someone he loved while his own mind burned with terror. He chose connection over isolation. He chose courage over fear. That is more Draconari than hiding on our homeworld for another 1,000 years. Vareth opened his mouth to argue, but Mordeth raised his hand. I watched him, Vareth. I watched him walk through his own nightmare to reach her. Do you understand what that means? For millions of years, our hatchlings have been prisoners of their fear. They cannot escape it. They cannot control it. They can only endure it until they grow old enough for it to fade. Mordeth looked at Sarth again. The hatchling was awake now, watching the proceedings with curious eyes. His scales were calm blue. This hatchling has learned something that none of us could teach him. He has learned that some things are worth being afraid for. The chamber was completely quiet. I propose a new alliance, Mordeth said. Not just trade agreements or diplomatic protocols. A true partnership between Draconari and humans. Our children will be raised together. Our hatchlings will learn to be brave from human infants who do not know fear. And perhaps, in time, we will become something better than we are alone. The vote was not unanimous. Vareth and his faction refused to support it, but they were outnumbered. The alliance passed by a margin of 3-1. Yanara found herself crying again as the results were announced. She had come to this station expecting failure. She had come expecting to watch her son suffer through another round of terror and rejection. Instead, she had witnessed a miracle. Daniel put his hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" "I do not know what I am," she admitted. "Happy, I think, and terrified and grateful." Sounds about right for a parent. They watched as the council members approached to congratulate them. Species that had never spoken to Draconari before now wanted to shake hands, discuss partnerships, plan for a shared future. But the true celebration was happening on the floor. Sarth had woken Lily by licking her face, and the baby was giggling with delight. She grabbed his ear and tugged gently. He responded by blowing a small puff of warm smoke at her hair, making it flutter. Other hatchlings had gathered nearby. 3 young Draconari who had been brought to the station for observation were watching Sarth and Lily with fascination. Their scales were not blue yet, but they were not red either. They were learning. Slowly, carefully, they were learning that the universe might not be as terrifying as their instincts claimed. One of the hatchlings crept closer. Lily noticed and waved at her, the same clumsy wave she had made through the window months ago. The hatchling scales flickered, green, yellow, the edges of blue. "It works," Dr. Okonkwo breathed. "It actually works." Yanara knelt beside her son. "You have changed everything, little one. You and your strange, small friend." Sarth chirped at her, then went back to grooming Lily's hair. Years later, historians would call this the first contact that mattered. The day when 2 species discovered that their greatest weakness was actually their greatest strength. The Draconari had spent millions of years afraid. They had built walls around their civilization, hiding from a universe that seemed designed to hurt them. It took a human baby to show them the truth. Fear was not the enemy. Isolation was. Loneliness was. The belief that they had to face the darkness alone. Lily Brennan grew up alongside Sarth. They learned to walk together, to speak together, to face the universe together. When Lily turned 18, Sarth had grown into a magnificent dragon, but he still curled around her protectively when she slept. When the first human Draconari Academy opened, they were its founding students. When the Galactic Council recognized the alliance as the most successful diplomatic partnership in recorded history, they stood together to accept the honor. And when other species began to struggle with their own fearful young, they knew exactly who to call. The smallest had led the way. The helpless had found strength in each other. The vulnerable had become unbreakable. Because sometimes the bravest thing in the universe is not the warrior who feels no fear. It is the baby who reaches out anyway.